Hello, hello. Today I'm going to be going over how to do video analysis of melee replays. So, when I've played against newer players, I oftentimes get asked after I'm done playing, okay, well, what did I do wrong? Did you notice anything that I was making mistakes on? Could I do better? You know, what advice would you have for me to improve? And one of the first questions I usually ask is like, okay, well, do you practice tech skill on your own? And do you do video analysis on your own? And almost all the time, they say no to both, right? Sometimes people practice tech skill on their own, um, but oftentimes they're like practicing cool tech skill. They're trying to like wave shine opponents off the stage or like shine infinite someone on the rock transformation in Pokemon. very, very, very infrequently is it people actually doing dedicated tech skill practice to improve their movement or dedicated VOD analysis to improve their neutral. So that's the first thing that I recommend people is like, okay, how do you improve? Right? They're asking how do I get better at the game? I've hit a plateau. I haven't seen to be beating better players than myself recently. What can I do to improve? So this will be a guide on how to start getting into doing video analysis of melee replays of your own sets and of other players' sets to improve your neutral game, to help you learn more about the game. So the first thing that you need in order to actually start doing video analysis is to get in this mindset, right? You need to be in the mindset of thinking in terms of a goal for a player, right? Because you have to watch the game while asking the question, what should my game plan be in this matchup, on this stage, or in this position? Right? This is the actual question that will give you answers that will help you improve your game. But okay, so what do I mean by game plan? What am I talking about? Okay, so imagine this is Final Destination. Right, so these are the general. This is kind of like general stage position advantage, right? So both players, they spawn over here, right? There's player one, right? There's red player, and then there's blue player. And then here, center. I don't know if you can see this that well, but it doesn't matter. This is the center area. So if you have both players spawning on either side of the stage, right? They're essentially in the same position, right? They're both on corner of the stage relative to one another. So the only real difference in position on Final Destination is being in the corner or being in the center, right? Those are the two locations you can be on in FD. Right? You're either on the corner or you're on the center. Right? Sometimes you'll have both players in the corner on one side of it. You have both players in the center. But the two basic positions, right? And so now the question is, which position is better, right? Is there a difference in position that would make one better than the other? And the answer is hopefully pretty easy, because center is the best position to be in. Holding center stage means that you're as far away from the blast zones as possible, right? Because you die over here if you get sent over here, right? So you want to be as far away from these areas as possible. The best way to do that is to be in the center. Added bonus of that is if you're in the center, your opponent is always between you. Right? If you're center, your opponent is between you and the blast zone. Right? And that's the position you want to be in, right? You want your opponent to be closer to the blast zone than you are. Right, so this is the basics of positional advantage, right? You can add in platforms. Look at that, now we're on Battlefield. You can add in platforms, which kind of change it a little bit. But in general, this center zone right here, this is where you want to be. This is the golden zone, right? That's where you want to be. That's the best place. That's the safest place. It's the most survivable place. And if you're center with a lead, like if you're ahead of stock and you're center, your opponent has to approach you and you're in the most advantageous position. And so that's the kind of situation you want to set up, if at all possible. So that's kind of what I mean by a game plan, right? You have to start here, right? You have to start knowing this, and then you apply the character-specific stuff, right? So if you're a fox, your opponent's also a fox. You say, okay, so what's the best thing for me to do spawning here, right? Well, I want to run center stage, hopefully take center, because if my opponent doesn't run center stage, then I'm just ahead, right? I just won neutral. And I didn't even have to attack. I didn't have to commit to anything. I just dashed forward, right? If your opponent also tries to take center, if you have the reaction time of a god, you could like shine or grab, jab maybe. That's kind of what I mean by game plan, right? You need to think in these like kind of abstract terms. Think about stage position, neutral advantage, and the core of Melee and the core of Smash in general is you want your opponent to be closer to the blast zone than you are. That's what I mean by game plan, right? So you have to have a general idea of what's good to do, right? Because without an answer to the question of what should I be doing, you're not actually going to be able to look at any decision you make in game and decide if it was a good or a bad decision. Right, if you've got nothing to compare it against, nothing to base the value off of, you're not going to be able to make good value judgments. So to really get the most out of video analysis, you need to go in it with a theory crafting mindset, right? You need to think in the abstract, what is a good strategy for me to take in a game of Melee, right? And so with the game plan in mind, you want to watch the set very slowly, right? You want to, and so this is how I like to do my replays, right? I look for each time neutral is broken, right? Which means each time a character interaction happened that wasn't them just moving around the stage, jockeying for position, right? So this is when the characters go into a state of advantage or disadvantage, right? So I'm looking for each time neutral is broken and how it happened, why did it happen, right? If someone got a hit, why were they able to get a hit? Did the opponent miss space? Did someone get a movement read? Right? Could the opponent have done something differently to avoid getting hit? Did the player just get a sick movement read and then get a hit as a result of that, as opposed to adapting to their opponent's habits? Right? Because these are the kind of questions you need to answer while you're watching a game to determine how either you outplayed your opponent or your opponent outplayed you. Right? Because you need to understand the game that's being played, that's beating you, in order to actually improve against it. After you analyze the neutral opening, you can examine the punish. Right? This is the other half of the game. The primary benefit of doing video analysis will definitely be improving your neutral. However, video analysis definitely gives you an interesting way to look at punish game, right? Because you get to basically examine each move in slow motion one at a time, which isn't something you can do while in game, right? It's way too fast to be able to think about it in game. So watching through, you can examine the punish. You can see if you're really going for the best options given certain DIs, given certain openings, however you open them up. Or maybe you're just picking the wrong follow-up option after a hit, and it's costing you a lot of percent, and it's causing you to have to win neutral like way more times than you otherwise would. Right, so if you get a hit in neutral, right, was it just a single hit contesting space in neutral, right, like fade away back air and your opponent just ran into it, get a hit for free? Could you have done something to get a bigger punish? Right, this is what I'm talking about, or maybe you're picking the wrong follow-up option. Maybe there's a way that you could be getting even an extra hit to send your opponent off stage, right, get an edge guard situation out of it. Whereas otherwise, maybe you're just getting like a jab into a tilt, something unexciting. Right, so after the punish is done, right, after the combo is done, and you hit the opponent too far away to really follow up, what did the aggressor look for after it, right? Did they retreat, take space? Did they try to get a movement read? Right, so this is the thing that a lot of lower and mid-level players struggle with, is after one set of actions ends, right, so after a combo ends, after a neutral interaction ends, after something ends, there's a lot of dead time before they start doing the next thing, right? So after their combo is done, they'll just kind of sit there and look at the position and be like, I wonder what I should do. And you'll see players just kind of stand still for a frame or two, right? But it's them having to decide in that moment, okay, what should I do? Video analysis gives you the chance to look at those situations and to plan ahead for the next time you would find yourself in them, so that you can act instantly after the situation ends, right? So what did the aggressor look for after the punish was done, right? You should have an idea in your head while the combo's happening of what you're going to do after it's over, right? What you're going to do next, right? Because if you're thinking about it after the combo ends, you're too slow, right? You've taken too long to decide, and you really missed your window of opportunity. Right? So this gives you a chance to plan out, okay, after I hit my opponent off stage, I'm going to take space, take the corner from them, really force them to have to go to ledge, and then try to get the edge guard coverage. And then what did the defender do, right? After getting hit, did they just double jump immediately? Are they double jumping like over my follow-up hits every time? Could I be getting a kill here? Am I just committing a little too early and I just need to wait for them to commit to the double jump first? Is the defender running forward after getting hit? Are they running away? Are they always like teching in place? Stuff like that. Just try to analyze the outcomes of every situation, so that if you see them happen a lot in a set, you can kind of pick up on the pattern, right? That's another big thing for video analysis, is trying to do pattern recognition, right? Just trying to see if you're doing the same thing over and over again and you're not getting the result you're looking for, what could you be doing differently? Right, so then after each interaction, you want to kind of think about who has advantage here, right? Who did that interaction benefit, right? And so you need to consider the positional advantage, which is what I kind of explained through paint. Score-wise, who's in terms of percent, in terms of stock, and then in terms of momentum, right? Like who's actually on the upper third? Is one player just playing quicker than the other one in the other one's head? That is a somewhat significant factor when you're playing melee. Not as concrete as the positional or score advantage, but it's very important for in the moment. And then this is what I was talking about in terms of pattern recognition, right? Is this similar to any other neutral openings that happened in this game, in this set? Are the players actually adapting to one another? Are they noticing these habits on the fly? These are all really good questions to keep in mind while you're watching games, right? And then you just, that's really it, right? If you do all of this, you've really examined almost the totality of the whole interaction, right? So you just rinse and repeat, get through the whole set. But the thing to keep in mind is that this can take a long time, right? This is a pretty meticulous style of VOD analysis, right? You're really taking a fine-toothed comb and going through these replays, trying to maximize and optimize every single micro situation. But this is more of the kind of PPMD school of video analysis. But this is, in my opinion, this is the most holistic and robust way to go through videos. It can take a long time because there's just so many decisions that take place so quickly in a set of melee, that when you look at all of these things, if you actually try to really analyze all of the decisions that get made, it's just a lot, right? There's just so much to consider. There's another style of doing replay analysis, which is a little more streamlined than this, and I guess it's probably the method that most people kind of intuitively go to, which is that they're practicing some new tech, right? They're trying to implement some new tech. They might have grinded it for a couple hours in solo practice. They can hit it consistently, most of the time, maybe half the time. But when they try to do it in an actual game, they just like SD every time, right? They're not actually being able to implement it in a real game. And so sometimes a lot of players will look up to top players and see how they implement that tech that they're trying to practice and implement in their own game themselves. And so that's the other way you could kind of go through replays, is trying to focus on one specific aspect of the game and noticing how another player is doing it or how you're doing it yourself, to look for things to practice, right? To either aid your practice, right? Maybe you're just going for the wrong thing every time and you're able to notice it more in a video of you in an actual set than during your just solo practice. Or you're looking at a top player actually implementing really well the tech that you're having trouble using in real games. Right? And so when you're doing that, you can kind of skip over a lot of the smaller neutral interactions. But that is a more limited benefit in terms of video analysis. But if you're just trying to learn one tech, it is pretty focused and it's pretty good. And so now let's talk about the different kinds of videos that you can analyze and the mindset you should have for each kind of match that you're watching, right? So the first one, and probably the most important one, is your own matches, right? Watching sets of yourself playing. This is the big one, right? These are the hardest to analyze, right? One, it just feels weird watching yourself do anything, right? But to analyze your own game, there's just so much you have to beat, right? Your brain is kind of working against you in this effort, right? There's so much personal bias that you have to contend with. right? You always want to give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You always want to, think about yourself as maybe a better player than you actually are. But to actually get the most out of this analysis and improvement, you need to take yourself out of the replay as much as possible, right? You have to look at the game as it is, right? Look at your play as it is, right? What would you think of your play if you were just watching some random on a setup rotation, right? The big thing is you don't want to give yourself credit for making a bad decision and getting lucky, right? If you go for a stupid forward smash read that really shouldn't have hit, but your opponent like tech flubbed back into it, right? You didn't get a sick read, right? You just got lucky. And so it's important to note when you actually get lucky, right? You don't have to think down on yourself, but a lot of people want to give themselves just all the credit in the world. And it makes it harder to gain improvement because if you think of yourself as better than you are, you won't look for each small incremental gain you can make in your gameplay. So the advantage of this kind of analysis is that you should really hopefully know your own playstyle well, and you should have a decent handle on your game, the way you approach playing the game. Right? And so you might already know what areas of your game are lacking, and you might want to focus on those areas, which is what I was alluding to earlier, right? Where you focus on one specific aspect of the game, and it makes for easier analysis and allows you to kind of go through replays quicker, right? If you have a lot of replays that you have, you can do kind of a glut of analysis over a bunch of games, all focusing on one specific aspect, and see if you have a pattern, game in and game out, that you want to address. And the big thing about doing self-analysis that's important is that it's the most direct avenue for improvement. Right? It allows you to address the things that are affecting your personal game like right now. Right? So you're not watching like top players and being like, oh wow, this is some crazy game, some crazy melee. Let me think about what they're actually thinking about. I could be a top player one day. Let me try to put myself in their shoes, right? The game the top players are playing is really hard. It's really fast, and there's usually a gigantic gap between what a top player is thinking and how they're able to interact with the game versus what you can do. And it's important to remember that. And so analyzing games of players around your skill level, and ideally yourself, will allow you to get the most direct improvement by giving you the most concrete steps of things to do next to improve your game right now. And of course, you can pop off if you do something sick, right? You got to be your own best cheerleader. If you're not your own biggest fan, you're going to have a hard time. So this is the most important kind of analysis. The biggest thing is just trying to take away as much personal bias as you can and analyzing your replays like it was just some random player. Right? And it will feel weird watching yourself play. If you do something bad, you're gonna shamefully look away. But you gotta stare at it. You gotta look in the mirror. If you don't like what's looking back at you, here's your chance to change it. It's the easiest avenue for improving. So number 2. Next most important kind of analysis to do is analyzing games of other players of a similar skill level to yourself. Other players around your skill level, they can be going through a lot of the same shortcomings and have a lot of the same faults in their game that you do. But watching them play, you won't be kind of dealing with that same personal bias that I was talking about for the first one. And that personal bias is a real issue, right? It's even knowing about it, you're not going to be able to fully get around it, right? It's just how our brains work. But watching other players than yourself, especially if they're dealing with some of the same problems, you might be able to notice it more easily, notice it more clearly, and be able to better visualize how to play around it or what to do to improve upon it than if you were watching yourself. And so for improving yourself, watching other players around your same skill level is super important. Right? You can look to see if they're struggling with the same things you were. You're trying to notice and improve on your game. Right? If you're doing that super focused analysis where you're looking for a specific aspect, or if they struggle with those same things you're trying to notice and improve on, it just gives you another way to look at how another player is trying to implement that same tech. And then watching other players allows you to examine different punish flowcharts, movement patterns, neutral approaches, and see how they work that you wouldn't normally go for yourself, right? So you get kind of the experimentation of in-game play without actually having to do it yourself. And if you're watching someone else go down option trees that you wouldn't yourself, they'll have more practice in it. You'll be able to see if the way they're doing it is even worth exploring yourself. Right? So you get kind of it's just free game time, really, is what that is. Right? It gives yourself extra time in game, extra exploration. And then any really good new tech that you see should be able to be implemented more easily than from top players, right? If you're watching a player around your own skill level and they do something sick that you're not doing yourself, it's a lot easier to just steal that than it is to, take these crazy multi-shine infinites that top players are doing. And just be, yeah, I can do that, no problem. Right? A player around your own skill level, there should hopefully be not too big of a tech skill discrepancy between you two. Such that, you can just take their tech and implement it very quickly. So this allows very rapid improvement by watching players around your own skill level in addition to watching your own games. So I'd say the next most important category for the players to watch is of new players. So this might be a little weird, but I think that watching lower level players is a very important thing to do to improve, especially in the low to low mid level. Right? Because this exists, right? It's super common, right? To just watch a setup, you watch players play, you're moving around, you can see a punish or two, and you're like, these guys aren't that good. And then you stop paying attention to the game almost immediately, right? It's just low level drudgery, right? It doesn't deserve your attention. This happens a lot, right? And you just got to get over yourself. Get over yourself. Newer players are going to have a different perspective on the game than you, and they might be lacking in tech skill and some fundamental game sense, but they can choose interesting options that might inspire you to do something in your own play. And then if you watch new player games, you can watch through them much more quickly because there is a lot of wasted movement and a lot of dead air in lower level player games, right? There's a lot of just standing around, moving around needlessly, and they're just doing bad player stuff. But it is important for improvement's sake to be able to look at a newer player's gameplay and identify what the actual problems with it are. Right? Because if you can't look at newer player gameplay and identify specifically what they're doing wrong and the areas for improvement, you're not going to be able to notice those same flaws in yourself if you share those flaws, but maybe to a lesser degree. Maybe you're a little bit better at it, but it still kind of plagues your game to some extent. Noticing that same fault in a newer player's game can help expose it more readily in your own. So that's one of the big benefits that can help you do analysis. And especially for mid-level players looking to get better, and especially looking to improve your video analysis skills. Watching low-level player games is like watching replays on easy mode. So I would definitely recommend watching new players. And then you also get this nice side benefit, right? So once you start getting good at the game, newer players might be asking you to do analysis and for guidance on what they can do to improve. So doing analysis of low-level games can help you pick up on patterns of other lower-level players and help you explain that to them during a play session. Right? So this really helps out newer players to be able to specifically name the things that they are or are not doing correctly, and then what the next steps to take to improve those are. Right, so once you start getting good, once you start beating newer players really consistently, they're gonna be like, "Hey, man, do you know what I did wrong? What can I do to improve?" Doing low-level player analysis really helps you answer that question because you'll be able to pick up more easily on the patterns exhibited by lower-level players, and so then you can talk to them, during the session about what they're doing wrong. What you're looking for to punish them, and maybe what they could do instead of that to have a better outcome. So in addition to helping yourself get better at video analysis and better at identifying the faults in your own game, you can help out that. You can help out the newbies, and that's just a win-win, right? That's what you want to be doing. Next most important of top players. And I actually think it's more important to do video analysis of new player replays than top player replays, because for players who are lower skill level than yourself, you should be able to basically entirely understand their game, right? A newer player should be playing at a level below you such that you can understand 100% of what they're thinking, of all the options they're selecting. Like, you've done the tech skill yourself, you've considered these options, and maybe you've found better ones, maybe you've progressed past their level. But a new player game you can understand entirely, and so you're able to make insights into that game more easily than top players, right? Top players, they're moving really fast, they're doing insane option selects, insane tech skill, they're going crazy punishes, right? And they might be more interesting games to watch, but you might not be able to actually gain as much insight into how to improve by watching top players than you would by watching lower level players. It's kind of an unintuitive thing, right? You would always think, oh, I just want to watch the best players and just copy what they do. But in Melee, watching super top players, they can often be like just so unbelievably better than you that you can't actually just watch them and copy. It's just too hard, right? You have to be like a borderline top 100 player to really watch top players, understand what they're thinking, and be able to implement the game at the same level as them. So, with all that in mind, it is potentially the biggest source of improvement, and it will be necessary at a certain point in your development as a player to be able to watch top-level games and understand what they're doing. But like I was saying, this is like borderline top 100. This is like your like top 1,000, top 500 territory, where watching newer player games drops off, right? The importance of doing this drops off, and then it kind of gets replaced with watching top player games, right? This is at the point where your tech skill is good enough that you could do the things that they're doing, right? You can watch them play, understand the inputs that they're doing, and you could do them yourself, right? That's where these top player replays really become important, because then you're looking to optimize small situations, improve your general neutral, improve your general matchup game plans. And, you know, you've theory crafted a lot yourself, and so now you need to be looking at the big dogs to see how to actually win the game. And so there's a number of disadvantages, like I was talking about earlier. The analysis of high-level games takes just so much longer. Both players are making a ton of high-level decisions very quickly, and they're able to execute on options that you might otherwise not consider. Right, like if you've ever watched PPMD do a video analysis, he talks for so long about the game, right? He could go for like half an hour on like the first 20 seconds of gameplay, right? There's just so many options that high-level players consider at every frame of the game that analysis of these kind of games, it can just be super dense. And then this applies to more like mid-level players or players looking to improve by watching high-level games, where the high-level player is like a lot better than them, is that they might choose options that you don't understand, and it could confuse you. So they might be going for some movement bait that you don't really understand, right? It might be more of a nuanced option than you're used to selecting. So they might be doing a bait, anticipating their opponent to go for this attack, and they're trying to whiff punish, and they know that they'll be able to crouch cancel it and trade, and you might just not understand the full decision tree that they're trying to go for. And so it could be confusing. So this is especially true for lower level players. Watching top level players, don't try to read too much into their mindset, because they might just be too far above you. Four mangs all messed up here. For watching top player games, if you play a character that has very few top level representatives, certain players could dominate the character and then steal the development of the character in an incredibly centralizing way. Right, so this is AMSA and Axe. Right, and this isn't altogether a bad thing, but it can hold you back if you're getting close to their skill level. Right, so if you're like this is advice for a very slim number of people. Right, but if you're in the top 20 Yoshis in the world, right, or the top 20 Pikachus, AMSA and Axe are some of the only super high level character representatives that you'll be able to watch replays of, right? And so watching so many replays of just a single top player, you're going to really understand their playstyle as opposed to what the character can do more holistically, right? And that's not, like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing because they might just be doing the best options at any given point, but it can centralize the character development around just a couple figureheads. So just important to keep that in mind. But again, you gotta be real good for that to matter. And then the advantages of watching top level replays. When you watch top level games, especially as opposed to mid level games or low level games, there's much more easily accessible replays with a greater diversity of character matchups. So top level players, you're going to see like every top 8 recorded, a lot of top 16s, top 32s, like all the way through all the matches. And there's just a lot of different character matchups that happen there. And there's just a lot more replays, and they'll be on more viewed and more circulated channels, right? Whereas lower level games, mid level games could be on just, like a local weeklies scene where they upload the stream VODs of like the whole tournament. And you gotta like look for the timestamp of your match through, hours of pools games. And so that is actually a bad thing about watching lower level games. And top level games oftentimes have a much more curated video selection. Watching the games is just way more fun, right? They're playing higher stakes games. They're playing for actual money. The gameplay is a lot more interesting. Both players know what they're doing, and they're playing against each other, and they're really in it. And high level melee is just sick. And then, so we've talked about. This is the last kind of game, right? We've talked about watching replays of yourself, right? Self-analysis. That's the most important. Next most important was watching replays of players around your skill level, right? Similarly skilled players can help you improve more than players of very disparate skill levels. Next was the new players, right? Watching low-level players. Make sure you understand the totality of their game. You can spot the flaws very easily. They're much more obvious. Top-level players to watch the really good shit. Watch all those really good players do their good stuff. And then the last one, mismatched skill levels, right? Where you're watching some guy in round 1 pools who got unlucky and he's going up against None, right? He's getting stomps. None's playing Mario. It's a 4 stock. There's not really a ton to learn here, right? These can be tough. Right? These are the least useful kind of matches to learn from, and they're probably the best sources of matches to get cool combos. So if it comes to a point where you've developed as a player and you're like a mid-level player, you might be able to 4-stock a new player very consistently, right? And so watching a replay of yourself bodying some new player isn't going to give you a lot of material to improve on, right? The only thing you might notice are like tech skill mistakes, tech flubs. You might not be going for edge guards the right way all the time. You can analyze your punish game, but in neutral, you're just beating this guy over and over and over again. So not a ton to learn there. And if the skill differential is too large, the stronger player could just be like too fast for the weaker player to keep up with. Right? The melee is a game where if you're actually just significantly faster than your opponent, you can oftentimes just outmuscle them that way. They're a little bit closer in skill than that. The better player might be able to just exploit like a single shortcoming in the lesser player's game and just rinse and repeat over and over and over again. Like 3-stock the player easily. So these, oftentimes in these sets, you'll spend a lot of time in game 1 doing general analysis and noticing the things that separate the players. But then in game 2 oftentimes they don't go to game 3. But in game 2, you'll just be like, oh yeah, it's kind of more of the same. They're punishing him for the same things, picking up on the same habits, punishing the same patterns. And so analysis of the second game might go, just super easily compared to the first. And oftentimes these are the most common takeaways, right? Where the lesser player, you just kind of go grind tech skill, right? You're just bad at executing stuff. You need to stop DIing in on combos. This is the thing that top players can just 4-stock lesser players super quickly on, rather than just get hit and then just DI in all the time. Learning to crouch cancel or being punished by your opponent crouch canceling over and over again. You gotta learn how to play around that. Might just be getting stomped for not mixing up their recoveries. Might not be hitting any of their edge guards. This is a big one, right? So on FD, if you're center and your opponent's in the corner, you don't want to run from center to the corner, right? You want to stop here, right? Kind of in the middle zone. Because if you're approaching corner and your opponent gets around, they've reversed the situation entirely on you, right? You always want to make sure that you're more centered than your opponent. And so, don't approach them in the corner. Just don't approach them while they're in the corner. Right? You want to wall them while they're in the corner, stop them from getting center, but you don't want to like try to take the corner from them. And then just please hold ledge. Hold ledge once. Just hold ledge. You can hold ledge. It kills people. You can take stocks without even doing an attack. Just hold ledge. And that's it. Okay, so that was fairly long-winded, but a little rambly. But I think I covered the general mindset that you want to be in while you're doing analysis of each of these kind of game. And I'm going to do a video example of how to do a self-analysis replay, because I think, again, that's the most important, and I think it's oftentimes the most difficult for a person to get into. So I'll do a video analysis of one of my own sets as an example, and hopefully that'll clarify any questions that you might have after hearing me go through all this. Yeah, if I didn't explain anything clearly, or if you have any questions about anything like here, please feel free to leave the question and a comment, or you can message me on Discord, and I'll be happy to answer it. I think this is just art, really, is what this is. Oh gosh. Okay, I'm gonna do that video analysis. Thank you for watching. Hope it was helpful, and I hope you get better.